Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My dear colleagues, dear friends, dear students and participants, we have an interesting title, Bullying and the Nafs, Causes and Interventions by Dr. Asma Fisher. Dr. Asma Fisher was born in Pakistan and has lived in the US as a citizen of most of her life. Dr. Fisher is a pediatric neurologist and has served as faculty and medical director at the University of Nebraska in Omaha, Nebraska, the Medical College of Georgia in Augusta, Georgia, and the Child Neurology Center in Evans, Georgia. She has served as president of the Neurosonology Research Group of the World Federation of Neurology and is the co-founder and board member of the Jenna Institute. She is a member of the Southern Women's Literary Club, Philomatics, and enjoys presenting research papers on unique perspectives by women. She is currently studying sacred texts in a fellowship in spiritual studies in Istanbul, Turkey, and divides her time between Turkey and Augusta, Georgia, USA. Please welcome Dr. Asma Fisher. Thank you. Muhammad Askari is here. Please, yes. Yes, please. Muhammad Askari, he completed his bachelor's at the University of York, and he's currently doing his Master of Education at Niagara University. He took part in individual and collaborative research in Middle Eastern and medieval thought and literature, gaining advanced knowledge and skills in Islamic philosophy, literature, and translation of primary texts into English. He is interested in medieval and Islamic philosophy, metaphysics, ethics, moral psychology, philosophy of education, philosophy of theology. Thank you. Welcome. Sister Esma, the floor is yours, please.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala Rasulillah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum, honored guests, professionals, experts, and in Turkish, genç, young people.
Young people.
So, no, he's going to run it. Okay. I just have a case that I need to read. So the way I came upon this topic was that over the years, I was noticing something that was growing in the practice of pediatric neurology, even though I wasn't practicing psychiatry except by default. So I would like to acknowledge my colleagues. Dr. Suleiman, I can't really call him my colleague because he's a big-time professor and I'm just a humble student of Tasawwuf. Dr. Suleiman Derin has been extremely helpful in formulating this presentation for me. And my friend Aisha, who actually came to my apartment and we worked on this concept of bullying and the nafs. So I'm deeply grateful to both of them. I do want to give a disclaimer that despite studying Tazkiyatun Nafs for 15 years, I am very deficient. And this honored introduction was not good for me because it goes to the head. I would also like Allah to forgive me and for you to forgive me for any mistakes. And the little child you see with me is my granddaughter, and it is that generation that we are focusing for the health and rejuvenation in the future. So I have heard a lot about p-values, written a lot of articles with p-values, but today what I'm going to present to you is is dependent on the following: facts, experience, outcome, multicultural exposure, different age groups. So in his, where I betray my age here, is that in the 47 years of seeing patients, and I counted the rough numbered, have minus the vacations, I noticed that there were a lot of patients that I had seen. And one thing that stood out common between the patients and the medical students that I saw was a theme that was running through that we're going to talk about. Also, I had the opportunity to teach normal kids, secular school kids, gifted kids, and now I teach a gifted class for mindfulness. And of course, the 15 years of struggle with Tazkiyatun Nafs. So a lot of this information is coming from there. One of the things that I learned in this 47 years was that there's things that consistently work, and there are things that consistently fail. The information is drawn from an ethnicity, a multi-ethnicity. America is multi-ethnic and multi-geographic because I was given the honor of traveling to many different places and belonging to many different organizations that allowed me to be exposed to patients. I also did a mission for Iraqi refugees in Syria before the war. So I was exposed to that milieu also, and of course some of the other countries that I mentioned here. I was exposed to Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, secular students. I don't think I have seen a true atheist except maybe one, and that was more in the older age group. So I really had to come up with ideas which would work everywhere across faiths. The ages I was dealing with mainly was 0 to 21 years, normal school kids 5 to 18 years, and graduate and postgraduate students that spent long time periods with me between 19 and 38 years. And believe me, after midnight, I can tell you that people really tell you things that they wouldn't want to tell you during the daytime, so you learn a lot about them. I want to honor my teachers. Sheikh Mukhtar Maghrabi has been consistent teacher for me. I'm not a good student of tasawwuf, but he still has hope in me. And Dr. William McKinney, who was my mentor in neurology, who always said, keep the faith. My patients, my students, my lifetime mentor who actually showed me how to live tazkiyah without saying it. I didn't know it had a name. And in her name, I have started my institute, Mahmouda Institute of Wellness and Mindful Living. That's my mother. We talked about the age groups. I'm going to do some storytelling here. I liked Dr. Darren's storytelling. So we call it case one, but I hate to call patients cases because really every child is extremely important to their family, to that microcosm of society where they belong. So I'll say case one because I've changed identities, etc., and names to protect the children's identity from public exposure. So this child, I call him a child, I met him for the first time in my office. The school had called and made the appointment as he had refused to speak since the incident. They wanted a pediatric neurologist to evaluate him for the possibility of a seizure disorder, the kind in which some children lose control, become violent, and then do not remember the incident. He sat on the examination table. He was tall, with dark curly hair, a round face, dark skin, stubby fingers, overweight in a football player kind of way. This is American football. He was large in body size, with rolls of fat belly oozing from below his t-shirt, going over his low-riding pants. The fat distribution on his chest gave the illusion of having breasts. It was his face that spoke that his age was only 13. There was pin-drop silence in the room. His mother explained that something happened in the locker room where he beat 4 boys to pulp, she said, with shame written all over her face. He has not spoken since then, she said. His sullen face and downcast eyes were like an iron wall. Not a flicker of emotion escaped into the geography of his expressionless face. I went up to him and I started my monologue. I told him I had been to a similar locker room where the showers were open and the boys after game night showered naked, 4 to 6 at a time. I had told the principal that I would not allow my son to play soccer for the school if he was to change out in the locker room where there was no privacy. It reminded me of the story in the Quran when the Israelites hid Moses' clothes when he went to bathe in the river because they wanted to see if he had an abnormal physique because he was always modestly dressed. After numerous reassurances from me that I would take care of whatever came out of this, he blurted out, I couldn't stand it anymore. Anger blazed in his eyes, and as they filled with tears, he lowered his head. His story filled me with anguish as I stood in his 13-year-old shoes. He was a good football player, and there were 4 boys that constantly nagged him for his body fatness, his rolls of flesh, the collection around his nipples that made him look like he had breasts. This went on for months. Finally, he started going into the stall to change into his boxers. They then started to tease him about his manhood, and this went on for 9 months. It was on that particular day he pulled back his arm and smashed it into the face of the leader of the bullies, and then kept going into the rest of them. Built like an iron wall, no one could stop him. The coach threatening him to be expelled from the team did not stop him. The school security officers trying to pull him off had difficulty restraining him. He suddenly had the strength of a madman, they said, relating the story to me. I had had it, he said in the end, and I am not sorry for what I did. He looked at his mother as she tried to shush him. He fell silent, crawling into himself and shutting off the pain to retreat into his own self. Of course, he did not have epilepsy, complex, partial, or otherwise. He had what 30% of American school children in grade 4 to 8 experience. 30% are bullied in the hallways and locker rooms of their schools. The US government states that 87% of students surveyed report that bullying is the primary motivator of school shootings, and 64% of the kids who are bullied never report it. I have 4 questions for you. The first one, and I want you to raise your hand and be honest. Have you ever witnessed bullying? Okay. Next, have you, and be honest about this could be sibling bullying, could be school, could be anywhere. Have you ever been bullied? Number 3, have you ever bullied anybody, or have you ever been what is called a bully victim bully? So, you like this boy that I just recounted to you, what was he? Was he a bully? Was he a victim? Or was he a bully victim bully? I want to hear from the audience, loudly. What was he? Bully victim bully. He had all 3 things. And last but most important for this group here is, when you witness bullying, did you do anything? How many did something? How many watched but didn't do anything? How many left? So that is where the problem comes in, because witnesses to bullying also develop psychiatric problems like PTSD. Right in your backyard here in Istanbul is a series playing as we speak. I was writing this paper when this came up. I don't know how you pronounce it. Duybeni? Duybeni? Duybeni. Duybeni. Hear me.
Hear me, sorry.
Hear me. This is an explicit series about bullying. I don't recommend you watch it because even I couldn't stomach it. They've taken all the kinds of bullying and put them all in one series. But if you are a psychologist and you want to find solutions, please go ahead. But it has everything in it. It has bullying victims, bully victims, witnesses, watchers, doing nothing, and then getting PTSD from that. How does the American Psychological Association define bullying? They say it is a form of aggressive behavior in which someone intentionally and repeatedly causes another person injury or discomfort. And I will add to that and find some pleasure in it. Bullying has been classified. One thing that the West does really well is they like to count. And I saw that in earlier papers, and they want us to count also. But humanity does not have a p-value. Counting helps, but it doesn't give us solutions. We have to find the solutions. So in counting, they said there is physical bullying, which is both in school and in homes, sibling bullying, emotional bullying, usually in spousal relationships, or even father and daughter or father and son. And then cyberbullying, which has come up like crazy in the last 10 years. And actually, it's one of the most dangerous kind because you can leave the school, you can go home, you can do homeschooling, but you can't escape cyberbullying. People can still continue to tell you you're ugly, why don't you die? Like this girl, she was terrorized to the point, she's 12 years old, that why don't you die? Why don't you kill yourself? You're so ugly. You're worthless. You're useless. Imagine if somebody gives you this message every single day. Doesn't matter who it is. Of course, if it's a person in power, it becomes more important. She finally committed suicide, and now bullying is a crime in the United States. You can report it to the police. You might think that Turkey doesn't have any bullying, but there are very sophisticated reports from Turkey. I think Turkey also likes to count numbers. So we do have 30% of 11 to 16-year-olds were bullied. In USA, 11 to 12-year-olds, 28% were bullied. The interesting thing about cyberbullying was the people who were most aware of cyberbullying, both being cyberbullying other kids, as well as being aware of it, was in Sweden. That was a surprise for me. And the lowest incidence of cyberbullying was in Greece. It was reported that 75% of shootings in the USA are linked to bullying. In 2019, bullying was the second highest cause for death in US residents aged 10 to 34 by suicide. This has become a major problem, not over there only, but here also. So let's go to something completely, what you would say, the other side, which is, how many of you think that you're born a bully? So, so obviously, most of you, other than Professor Darren, don't think that people are born bullies. So you don't believe that there is a genetic reason for being a bully. What if there was? So that's something we need to think about. Bullying is a complex phenomena that has increased exponentially in the last 15 years. And there is something within us which is called the nafs. Have you ever, when people part in English, they say, take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. They're not saying take care of your body, your brain, your head. They're saying take care of yourself. This is thousands of years people have said this. In Turkish they say, and if I'm right, kendine gel. Is that right?
Kendine iyi bak.
Kendine iyi bak.
Look after yourself.
Look after yourself. Kendine gel means control yourself, right? So if somebody's angry, say kendine gel. So it means control yourself. So everybody who is either wishing you well or asking you to control yourself is, even if they're not aware of the nafs, they are bringing it into your conversation and into your daily routine. So what is the nafs? The nafs in Arabic word, it occurs in the Quran and the meaning of self has been translated into psyche, ego, or soul, which is totally not enough. So anyway, we'll go on to what do we become? We become either who our nafs tells us to be and we encourage it, or we become who we choose to nurture. So which nafs do we choose? If we compare the bully and the nafs-e ammara, we notice that the bully is impulsive, lacking empathy, desire for dominance, which is nafs-e rububiya, has uncontrolled anger, which leads to the rage and rancor, vanity, pride, lying, arrogance, as according to Ghazali, and says violence is okay, and likes to prey on the weak. Who does that? The predators do that. I don't know, do I have time for a second case? Where's my timer?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. So I'll share one more case with you. And that is, he was a really sweet boy. He's about 12 years old, brought to me because he had uncontrollable anger, both with his teachers and with his grandmother. So they thought he had a seizure, so they brought him, and I talked to him. He didn't have a seizure, tested him. And I said, look, he came from a very religious Catholic family. So I said, look, why don't you do this? Psychologists had already tried the secular ways of anger control or anger management, hadn't worked. I said, why don't you do this? When you get angry, say, excuse me, I have to go to the bathroom. Sit in the bathroom, wash your hands with cold water, pour cold water on your wrists, wash your face with cold water, put cold water, touch your hair with cold water, your neck with cold water, then sit down and drink a glass of water and count to 25. If your anger hasn't gone away, do it again. If anger still hasn't gone away, do it a third time. I said this, and I said one more thing. You know, you try to hit your grandmother. Every night, I want you to read the Bible, one paragraph, and memorize one line. So he said, okay, doc, I'll do that. I said, promise? I said, yes. Comes back after 3 months, and he says, doc, it worked. I do that. I go to the bathroom, and I wash myself like you told me. And I have memorized a large part of the Bible. And he was a brilliant student. And he had stopped beating his grandmother and stopped being angry. So I was giving him the sunnah, but not in the name of the sunnah, but the actual, what the secular psychologists say, I was modifying his vagal response. I'm not going to go into the third one. All I want to say is what Dr. Duran said. There is an example of bullying in the Quran, where Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam was bullied. In the Hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, your worst enemy is your nafs, between your two sides. The Holy Quran provides hope for everybody, all faiths, everything. You just have to look at it and remember the dua that Yusuf alayhi salam said, please protect me from the nafs-e ammara. And he was in the fire when that happened, or he was in the most difficult part of his life. So, in my humble opinion and in my humble experience, if you have any question, if you go to the Quran, you will find the answer. Last couple words is, there are other interventions. The first thing is knowledge. Teach yourself. Know what the nafs is. Know how to minimize the nafs-e ammara. Nobody taught me that if you tell this Christian kid to do wudu, his anger will go away. But you have all that knowledge. You can apply it without putting a label on it, or put a label on it if you're in a Muslim country. Do not be a passive witness, because what you're doing is you're multiplying PTSD in yourself and in all the other people around. Number 3, do not justify it and say, oh, you know what, this is in my genes, I can't help it, I inherited it, what can I do, it's my nafs. No, you can change your nafs. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that bring to me qalbi salim, which means you have to make that qalbi salim. You were given the true fitra, but you have to work on cleansing and making it a qalbi salim. The most important thing that I learned is spiritual activism. Learn to say no. And I'm saying this in America. Saying no in America is not an easy thing. You put your life on the line sometimes. Or you can be labeled as one thing or another. But put your life on the line. Because what are you going to do here? You have a few years to live. The real life is later on. Last word. Honor your teachers and your elders. That's where I learned everything. And I don't mean by age, I mean by wisdom. And if you get a chance, read this book by Bill Plotkin. He talks about nature and the human soul. I think it'll help. And of course, read Imam Ghazali. He has everything in it. It's like a life book. Thank you so much for your attention. Please forgive me for my mistakes and keep me in your prayers.
Dr. Asma, thank you very much for your nice presentation. And really, Ghazali says, all of us were given these vices in our nature. We are all bullies, but not everyone is given the same amount of bully, what we call instinct. Some people have little, some people have a lot. Especially when you get power, then someone teases you, then this come up. If you're a manager, if you're a teacher, if you're a father, then someone teases you, someone below you in terms of money and wealth, then really you can see are you bully or not. Thank you. Now our second speaker, just a moment. Yes, Dr. Mohammed. Tanbih and Ta'lim in Islam, an Islamic developmental and educational framework. The floor is yours. Thank you. Please.
Can you help me with this? I don't understand Turkish.
I see.
Should I present from here or from the...
Yeah, you can present as you want from there.
Yeah.
Also possible.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وعلى صحبه الكرام. Assalamu alaikum. So our topic is Tanbih and Ta'lim, an Islamic educational framework. It's by my colleague Davla Dadi Khoda and myself. Before I start, very grateful to be here and want to thank the organizers, and it's a great honor to be among friends, especially so many from HBKU alumni. I think our professors would be proud. Except my professor, I think he would prefer that I work on my thesis. So, Bismillah. So the topic that we're presenting is on learning theory, and we are comparing the learning theory of Jean Piaget with learning theory, or the principles of learning theory that we find in Islamic thought, and we're trying to do a comparative analysis. Why this is important? In the broad field of pedagogy, there's a lot done in trying to approach modern pedagogy, modern education from the Islamic perspective, to create Islamic pedagogies and frameworks of Islamic education and teaching. A lot especially has been done on the tarbiyah side, on character development. A lot has been done on creating curriculums that are based on an Islamic framework. but we feel that not a lot has been done on the actual learning process, what that is, specifically engaging with the field of learning theory, that is, understanding how we learn, the stages of learning, and how that happens throughout our life. And that's very important because a lot of modern educational systems, a lot of teaching methods rely and draw from learning theory. And we find that in a lot of Islamic schools, we have Islamic subjects. We try to implement an Islamic worldview, the Sunnah in the Tarbiyah. But when it comes to the actual learning, we haven't based this on what derives from an Islamic worldview. And how basically the methodology is, you could say, summed up in renovation, which is a hallmark of the Islamic civilization. And I put the picture of the Hagia Sophia because it's an instance of this in architecture. We take what is good, we take what is there, and we renovate it. We make changes where it has to be repurposed, and that's kind of the method. So these are the stages that I'll be going through. The first, we're introducing Jean Piaget's learning theory. Secondly, we will look at what the Islamic philosophers have said on learning theory, how we learn. And third, we'll compare these two. And finally, we will try to see how we go from learning theory to teaching methods, meaning how on the ground in the school these learning theories become real in the actual methods of teaching from teacher to student. So firstly, Jean Piaget's theory. Jean Piaget was, as you know, an incredibly important theorist in developmental psychology. He saw himself actually as a genetic epistemologist, someone who's interested in how knowledge is constructed within the mind and throughout the stages of life. And he's really one of the pioneers of this field, and also theory of constructionism. So we'll look at his, and also another point is that even today his theories on developmental psychology, educational psychology, are very much dominant in teacher training. Like as a training teacher myself, we a lot of the theories on development and education that we're learning is his theories, and a lot of the teaching methods are inspired by his developmental psychology. So we'll go through these stages. So how does he see reality? Jean Piaget basically, inspired by like a Kantian idea of reality, he sees it as transformations in states. So out there in the world, there are things that are stable and there are things that are changing, and in between them, so there are transformations, things are changing, and in between those transformations, there are these stable states. That's kind of how he sees the world. And he believes that because of that structure of the world, we have the ability in our cognitive capacity to deal and conceptualize the figurative, the transformative aspects, as well as the static aspects of the world. And through this kind of engagement with the world, we go through these developmental stages. So one of the things that Piaget believes is that sorry? This one's off. I think it's off. Yeah, it's off. Okay, so his stages basically track our interaction with the world, because he believes that it's through this interaction that knowledge is created. So and we go through these stages. The sensory motor stage is where you're developing touch and interacting with the world on a very physical level. At the end of this stage, you develop object permanence, where at this point, you can't play peekaboo with a baby anymore, right? Because when you hide, it knows you're still there, right? So it comes to know that there's a permanence to objects. At the pre-operational stage, we begin, symbolic representation. Like we begin to represent things symbolically and not just physically. In the concrete operational stage, this is where in the culmination of it, you understand the law of conservation, that things, so the example given here is, they'll give 2 cups holding the same amount of liquid to a child, and they'll say, is this equal? And he'll say yes. And then they put it in a longer cup, but it's the same amount of liquid, and he'll say that, that cup holds more liquid. But at the end of this stage, they'll realize that it's actually the same liquid. So it's another stage of the rational. It's inductive reasoning. So at this stage is where inductive reasoning is developed, and at the next stage is actually where deductive reasoning occurs, and we begin to think about more abstract ideas and concepts. So again, to re-emphasize, Piaget believes that knowledge is constructed. It's constructed in this process of interacting with the world through our experiences. And knowledge is action, meaning that in this activity is the knowledge. So he doesn't believe that knowledge is out there completely or within us, right? It's in that interaction with it, with the world. This is kind of the process. So you have experience with the world. You develop these schemas about these concepts about what the world is like, and when you learn new concepts, you assimilate them. But when you learn new concepts, when you interact with something new that doesn't fit your current schemas, it disrupts them, you have to make room for it. So that's called accommodation. So through through assimilation and accommodation, you gain new schemas and ways of understanding the world. Now, on the second section, theory of the hukama, the Islamic philosophers. So by the Islamic philosophers or the hukama, we mean the Masha'i tradition, most importantly Ibn Sina and Farabi. And we believe that in their works there is a lot of important principles that we can engage with modern thought. And I was interested to see in the previous presentation, Dr. Nagat had already began this process, but I think nowadays there's a gap in accessing and applying the principles of the hukama, the Islamic philosophers, and sometimes it's portrayed as this is outdated science. It's not relevant, or whatever is relevant in it has been incorporated by the likes of Ghazali or other mutakallimun, but we believe that there's a lot more there, and it's a very rich tradition that will give us the tools to engage. So again, I'll go in a similar fashion, see their view of reality and so forth. So their view of reality, to the hukama, the world is saturated with intelligibility. What we mean by this is that there is an objective world, and it's constituted by mahiyat. These are quiddities that are real, and they have an intelligible nature. And also, they are thabit fi nafs al-amr. That is, they're fixed and they are firm within themselves, and also in their relationship with each other. So this is an objective world that the hukama envision and argument for. And this will be very important when we compare the two worldviews. The human being. So the Hukama hold to substance dualism. They believe the human being consists of two substances, soul and body. The soul, but what we mean by the soul, or what the Hukama mean by the soul, is the referent of I. Like, what do we mean when we say I? What that refers to is the nafs, what they believe is the nafs. And they believe in an instrumental model in the relationship between soul and body, right? That is, that the soul uses the body as an instrument for its purposes. So it's like, analogy is like a writer and a pen. So yeah, the soul uses the body for its teleological ends. That is the ends that it's given the type of thing that it is. What is its perfection? That's what it uses the body for. And what is the kind of structure of the soul and the body that allows it to have this relationship? So on the body side, it's necessary that it's equipped with these organs of perception. Okay, the eyes, the ears, the brain. For example, the soul cannot have this relationship with another body, like a frog body or a rock. It needs a body that is equipped with these organs of perception. And on the soul side, it needs external senses. So that is the five senses. Now, this is different than the organs. So we have organs of perception, and then we have capacities. So here we're talking about capacity. So the capacity for the five senses, internal senses. You have the common sense that gathers the data of the five senses. Hiss al-Mushtarak, the active imagination. This is what gathers the images from the senses. The retentive imagination, this is what stores these images from our interaction with the world. The estimative faculty, this is the faculty that allows us to associate meanings with the outside world, the things we see in the outside world, and then this is stored in the memory. So these are the capacities of the soul, and finally the intellect is the highest capacity of the soul, and it's actually what's the most essential to the soul, and it's the identity of the soul as well. And this is composed of two aspects: the theoretical intellect. This is the capacity that is for attaining only knowledge. That's its only goal is to look upward, so to speak, and to attain the knowledge of reality. And then we have the practical intellect, which is knowledge for the sake of action in this world. So this is a very important distinction here. The theoretical is solely for the purpose of knowledge, whereas the practical intellect is knowledge towards the aim of some action. And the intellect makes use. So the intellect makes use of all the previous capacities and organs that we talked about for this, its aim. So which is theoretical perfection, theoretical wisdom, and practical wisdom and perfection. So the practical aspect is mostly talked about in the works of ethics, akhlaq. That's its domain. And we can talk about the relationship between the two as well. So now on the stages of development of these. So the data that we experience in the world, there's a process and stage of development when it comes to the capacities that we talked about, other than the aql, so the sub-rational capacities. So firstly through the senses, and then through the common sense, we went over this, and then in the imagination, and then through estimation, the meanings that we gather, and then it's stored in the memory. And then the rational, most important stages of development is, having gathered this pool of data, of images and meanings. The intellect now works on these to be able to actualize itself. So in the first stage, it's aql bil quwwa, potential intellect. This is like an intellect that has the potential to know, but does not know how to or does not know. So analogy is like a child who has the ability to write, but doesn't know how to write. And then it goes on to aql bil malaka, dispositional intellect. So this is the level where they learn primary intelligibles. So like just the concept of thing, right? Every child at a very early stage knows that what a thing is, right? Even though it's not reflective, it's a knowledge nonetheless, because when they see something, they see the difference than when there's nothing, right? So when their toy is taken away, they know it's not there, right? So they have this concept of thing, or even the principle of non-contradiction. So my toy can't be here and not here at the same time. And you can see that in their behavior, right? So these are primary intelligibles. And then we go on to actual intellect, aql bil fi'l. So this is the stage where they're able to put these primary intelligibles together to learn something new about the world. So a secondary intelligible. An example is Pythagorean theorem, right? And then finally, acquired intellect is when. So in the third stage, they have this knowledge and they can recall it at will, right? They can contemplate it at will. In the fourth stage, they have this knowledge and they're engaged in contemplating it. They're in the state of contemplating this knowledge, and this is what, according to the philosophers, is the perfection of the theoretical intellect. This is the perfection of the species of man, according to the philosophers. Okay, last 2 minutes. Okay, let's move quickly. So the philosophers believe that knowledge is only these two. Theoretical knowledge, in the strict sense, is composed of these two: tasawwur, conceptualization, and tasdiq, to judge whether tasawwur is true or not. So, for example, tasawwur is that, for example, God exists. You're conceptualizing that statement. Tasdiq is to be able to judge that statement is true. So part 3, we'll do a little comparison. So in the views of reality of the two, it's very important that we see both what's consistent and useful and what is a distinction and what needs to be renovated. So they both believe, or this is consistent between them, that the world consists of both changing and stable realities, right? They're changing and stable things. What's different is the hukama insist on, and they're very firm on the objective and intelligible nature of the world, right? The world is real. It's not something that we construct, right? Whereas the constructivist theory is open to have the world be as we construct it, right? And this leads to some of the errors that we see in the world, and especially in education, where children are taught that, for example, this is one of the conclusions, that there's no gender, right? There is no objective gender, or and you can be what you want to be, and that truth, you can have your truth as you've constructed it, because there's no objective ground to what we're trying to learn. And also the metaphysical, theological principle that reality and intelligibility comes from above, from the divine. Regarding the self and the stages of development, so some of the things that are consistent and useful, the self is defined by its cognitive capacity. Both would agree with that. The development goes from complex, from simple to complex operations. And some of the observations of Piaget are very important, you know, of the changes between these stages, and they can be engaged with according to those principles of the philosophers. Some of the differences, so there's a descriptive versus prescriptive. So in the framework of the developmental psychologists, there is it's very descriptive. There's no like higher aim or goal, whereas for the philosophers it's a very the goal of it is ukhrawi. It's ultimately for the sa'ada, for the felicity of the soul in the world and beyond it, because they hold that the soul will go on, right? Second, Piaget does not account for one of the stages. I mean, I'll won't go into detail on that. And this is important: acquisition versus actualization. So, for the constructivists, we acquire capacities, right? That through this interaction with the world, we construct knowledge and we acquire capacities. Whereas for the hukama, we come with these capacities. We're simply actualizing them through this process of knowledge.
Can we stop here? Maybe and give chance for questions.
Okay, sure.
Because we are last minute. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
One question for each speaker. Who's the lucky? Sorry. You can ask Esma, please. Yes, please.
So I'm assuming it's probably in one of your slides, but in Piaget's kind of stages, there's deliberate ages as points of demarcation. And in the illusion of the Hukama's understanding, these things are innate and they're actualized. How would you see, I'm not sure if the Hukama, if you're using that as your paradigm, I'm not sure whether that would necessarily be something you can use to comment, but how would you see, from maybe the Hukama's perspective, or maybe from a broader Islamic perspective, because one of the things kind of missing from this paradigm was fitra, like how do we understand fitra? How do you see a potential understanding of looking at something like Piaget, for example, the sensory motor phase, and which I think ends with kind of language acquisition or something.
Right.
Now, from the Islamic perspective, كل مولود يولد على فطرة, right? Every child is born on the fitra. So there is a sense of knowing, and yet, even with the Hukama's perspective, there is an imperative to actualize something innate.
Yes.
Okay? So, what is the role, or what is the hikmah behind these stages? What is being actualized in terms of, okay, the sensory motor phase is there. Ostensibly, the child is, maybe from the Piaget's perspective, that development has not taken place. He's not acquired that development, and it's denoted by language acquisition or the end of sensory motor phase, and then he's entering into new. And it's interesting, even from the Piaget's model, that it's leading to greater and greater abstraction beyond the physical.
Right.
Which then, if you, as you said, the irony of postmodernism from Kant onwards is to say that there is no real reality, that it's all phenomenological and it's all subjective. But it's kind of pointing to the imperative that the Hukama say, that there is something you're meant to see and acquire in terms of the nafs al-amr, as in what is Allah revealing behind corporeality, what is revealing behind the appearance of the physical world. So it's a long question, sorry about this. But to get to the point is, Piaget is not exploring the reasons behind this. What is this? Now from the hukama, from a position of hikmah, whilst this child ostensibly is seemingly going from phase to phase and has to actualize something, what is the role of the fitra there? What did the child know? And why does he have to reactualize something if he knew it? What is being lost in the process of having to reactualize something, and how does that loss happen from the position of like a developmental curve?
Right. Yeah. Thank you. So for the hukama, the fitra is actually very different than what's in Sufism and in Kalam. The hukama see fitra as the potential, what we talked about, the potential intellect, right? So they identify with that it has these potentials, and that's alone is fitra, right? It's nothing more than that, right? And what's actualized is no longer fitra. So fitra is simply at that potential stage, and as it's moving, forward, it's actualizing what's in the fitra, but it's no longer being like governed by fitra.
Right, so it's like a blank state, but in potentiality, then that is the imperative to be actualized. Yeah. Just on that point, obviously, as you said, the Sufis are different, and the Sunni kind of metaphysic tradition is different in the sense that it's correlating the fitra to that mashhad, that witnessing of Allah.
Right. Yeah. So that's where the philosophers they don't believe in an idea of the masha'is. They don't believe in this idea of having previous knowledge. So in terms of knowledge, we're a blank slate according to them.
Yeah, which is against the normative tradition of Sunni. Sufis. But anyway, opening up a lot.
And another point is that again, to emphasize that for Piaget it's very very descriptive, right? They don't have a broader metaphysical framework or you could say philosophical psychology or anthropology framework of the nafs. What is the nafs? What are its what's its teleology, for example? They don't go into that. Whereas for the hukama, it's very clear. The objective of the nafs, the telos, its final end is sa'ada, is perfection of what it is, right?
Yeah, and the Sufis would agree with that, but they would say it's a returning back to what is originally known.
Right.
And they take that to be the names of Allah and the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is embedded and imprinted in the soul. Okay.
I think we can continue this discussion, inshallah, in the break.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jiha, for your nice question. I will also ask about Haybin Yaksan and learning, but in the break, not now.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
And one question for Dr. Esma, and after that we will enter the break. Please.
Assalamu alaikum. First, I would like to thank Brother Muhammad. Although we were together last night, I didn't recognize him, but I remember you now from the Kyle school, summer school, on the sports and ethics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know you were there.
I really was inspired with your presentation, and inshallah, maybe we'll have a chance for a collaborative work in future.
Inshallah, would be my honor.
Thank you. And actually, my question was for Dr. Asma. First, I introduce myself. My name is Yusra. I'm a performance, fitness, and swimming coach. And my question is regarding the football player. We always treat athletes as extraordinary persons because of their unique capacities. And due to the nature of their stressful life, physically and mentally, from your experience with that player, do you think it is possible to counsel athletes without having a foundational athletic background, and how far their nafs is similar to that of like normal people?
Please. Mike.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for a very interesting question and very difficult one to answer, because one of the ways we develop our athletic programs is by puffing up the nafs.
Yeah.
It's very famous in the south where I live that for girls, they put her in front of the mirror and say, "Oh my God, you look so beautiful." They never do that to a boy. For a boy, they say, he is a star soccer player, or he's in the football team. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that arrogance in women is from beauty and from men is in power. So any sports brings a lot of power. And what I would counsel, and I don't know if these are Muslim kids or non-Muslim kids, is that at least this is the way we were brought up, is that do your best. If you win, alhamdulillah. If you don't win, alhamdulillah. Because the final result is not in your hands. It's in his hands. So if the child goes with that, even if he loses, he doesn't feel bad about the game. Now, in a more secular environment, you can still do that by calling it sportsman's spirit, which means that, you did your best and the result is not in your hands because this is a team sport. It becomes more difficult when it's an individual sport. But I think the very basis of all this is to understand the nafs. And the last presentation, what really came to me, at least what my teachers taught me, was that the aql is really guided by the nafs. Because if you have a robust nafs amara, your aql says, do this, kill this, conquer that. So it doesn't matter, you may be the most intelligent person in the world, but you may be an evil genius, or you may be doing really harm, depending on the nafs. So in my book, study of the nafs, whether you're a teacher or a professor or a therapist, is you have to first of all know your own nafs also. If your patient comes and compliments you and says you're fantastic, you have to really know you're not fantastic. And an action of humility every day, I think, helps. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Thank you very much, Dr. Esma. Thank you. I will also add some answer from Dr. Rosman's yesterday, nice talk. He calls not sports, he calls discipline. For example, because when you say sport, it's like, pastime, hobby. You should be always happy and win. Whereas in Islam, it is discipline. Actually, I am also archer, Ottoman archer. When you draw the, this, arch, you say, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. And when we shoot, we shout, Ya Haq. Because you do your job, drawing the arrow, but if it hits the target, it's nothing to do with you. You do your best. Don't be proud. In Islamic sports, we never have fights, in wrestling especially. But in the Western, unfortunately, they have always this, fighting and bullying in the sports. I thank you very much for your patience. Now we have a break for almost 1 hour, 50 minutes. Thank you and see you in the afternoon sessions.